for that beautiful dance. I felt I was touched deeply myself. After getting used to the touching that I felt myself after the meditation. The reading just went so much with what I've been thinking about and talking about this week. I guess I'm the reason that the confusion happened, and I apologize. But Laura, do you mind just going once through our thoughts, our prayers? What page was that again? 62. 62. Let's just get in the mood here. As I was thinking about my talk today, those words came to me. And in the space I'm in right now, no words were spoken. The last couple of years as an American citizen, I've been baffled as I live my life the way I always have. And yet our elected officials are acting not in a way elected officials have in respect to human beings. It's disturbing, but more so worrisome when it comes to be exactly against my convictions of morality. This talk is a result of that disturbing, worrisome bafflement, which has been my companion for at least 2 years now. Because it's a national holiday, I've done some research to uncover the personal and public beliefs of our founders, to inquire why I think things should be going differently, and if there's any reason that I've made assumptions about what can be expected of the United States of America and living here. Is it my view that's wrong? What do I have to learn? I thought it was generally believed that the founders of the United States were mostly Christians because we have so many churches which were established in the time of the Revolutionary War. Many churches in New England, for instance, have statues of our country's founders in them and words written on plackets. This president was here. This president said this or that. But that fact that many presidents and leaders of our country visited Christian churches might be because they were attending services, but those church buildings were not used generally for 6 days of the week. And since the communities had built them, they just were public places of meeting, public places of discourse. Lately, I've heard evangelicals claiming that the majority of our founders were Orthodox Christians or born-again Christians. However, in the research that I've done more lately, it seems that the majority of our founders were not necessarily Christians. Instead, there's a religion that I hadn't really known of before called deism. And you can probably guess, we don't know, of course, what anyone's inside faith is or their religion. We can't say. But what's been researched is that when you look at actions, you can kind of deduce the type of faith in someone's heart. Hearing the opinion of clergy of that time, researching that has been done. So we can make educated guesses. A deist is one who believes in a God, but not a God who had a special son who had saving power. A deist was one who could invoke divine assistance, but whose life philosophy came mostly from human experience and rationality, rather than being informed by religious dogma and mystery. And it is these things of experience and rationality that informed many of our leaders' beliefs about the human society that they were working toward. Deism might be the faith described in Judy Gold's song, From a Distance, a vaguely held notion that a distant divine being is up there watching us, an occasion thinking about us and even forgiving our foibles. Deists see Christianity as made up from fables, but they respect the part of Christianity which encourages the work of making better people and policing one's own ethics. Deists firmly believed in the reward that would come from exercising good ethics and justice. Many of them spoke of these things and were looking forward to a better society that they were building, a society that they hadn't really seen in the world before. So I'm going to tell you some of the quotes that I found and see if they encourage you, lighten your burden as they did me. Thomas Jefferson is probably the most well-known of our founders for having philosophical or religious opinions. In the mind of most researchers I could find, he would be considered a deist. The reason we know him is because he was a statesman, a diplomat, an architect, and the third president of the United States. Words of his etched in stone will be found in plenty at the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C. But here's my favorite. God who gave us liberty. Since God gave us liberty, can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed a conviction that these liberties are a gift of God? Indeed, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just, that his justice cannot sleep forever. And a little later, he says, establish the law for educating the common people. This is the business of the state, to effect and provide a general plan. In my visit to the United States Capitol in 2017, George Mason probably stuck out to me as being the least known of our country's founders, but perhaps the most influential, because it was he that conceived of and wrote the Bill of Rights, or he was a major author of it anyway. Although he was a delegate to the Congress which signed the Constitution of the United States, he would not sign it. He was so respected, they asked, why are you not signing this? And among a few other things, he said that it did not contain a Bill of Rights. And a Bill of Rights was absolutely essential for forming a new country. Well, after that signing that he did not do, he was asked to be on a committee that would draw up a Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights was the basis for George Mason's words, and I'll remind you of those words which Thomas Jefferson made immortal. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal, and are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. George Mason took these words and enlarged them to the scale that impressed both George Washington and Mr. Madison, who brought the words in to be included as our Bill of Rights. Later on, as our country continued to be founded in the 1880s and 1900s, Franklin Delano Roosevelt came along. He was the only president that was elected for 4 terms. He actually served only 12 years because he died in office. But he is perhaps best known for the New Deal and for really taking care of the whole of the country in the years following World War II that were so very precarious for people taking care of themselves. Although FDR wasn't actually a founder, he is still one of our presidents whose legacy is felt to the present day. His legacy is still an important part of our country's ideals, as he has been memorialized in Washington, D.C. as well, along a park, and his words are put up in this size and even this size, etched in stone, and really made very dramatic. One of his most poignant sayings speak of his passionate belief that all people in a nation must be cared for. And here is one of his slogans: freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, freedom from fear. Feel that last one. This is one of the unalienable rights that we have. FDR wasn't talking about the 1%. It was assumed they could take care of themselves. FDR was speaking of ideals for all those living in our country. Everyone, no exceptions. Here's another of his quotes that I found very meaningful. We have faith that future generations will know that here in the middle of the 20th century, there came a time that those of goodwill found a way to unite and produce and fight to destroy the forces of ignorance and intolerance and slavery and war. Nearly 100 years ago, these words were spoken. Are they still appropriate to the present?
Now we've got due diligence.
Thank you. Nearly 100 years ago. Think about it. Another quote from FDR, they who seek to establish systems of government based on the regimentation of all human beings by a handful of individual rulers call this a new order. It is not new, and it is not order. Let me ask, could this quote inform us now? Another quote from FDR. The test of our progress is not whether we add to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough for those who have too little. And here's the final one I share today. We must scrupulously guard the civil rights and civil liberties of all citizens, whatever their background. We must remember that any oppression and injustice, any hatred is a wedge designed to attack our civilization. End of quote. Here at Interfaith, we are not a religious community, but a spiritual one. We know that Spirit speaks, and quite often silently. And how to have respect for people different than myself is something I learned by the Spirit. I was raised in the conservative part of Michigan, over there on the West Coast. I heard racist things there, not because people were mean-spirited, but because they lacked experiences to inform them of the truth. So as I grew, I began to test things on my own to find out what is truth for me. It was very important to me that I moved to a big city, so I went to college in Chicago. Amazed how many different races surrounded me. Amazed how many different places of worship. Amazed at the way people talked. And amazed at what I could learn. Well, let's go back to the song that we sang before my talk. One of my own watchwords as I live each day is this: you cannot change other people. You're lucky if you can change yourself. Think about that, Dawn. Think about that. It's so helpful. So, do we have power over our environment here in the U.S.? We should all do all we can to help society move toward the ways the Spirit teaches. But we are lucky if we can change ourselves. So as the song says, I try to monitor my thoughts and my ideas, because nobody else can monitor them, right? Nobody else but me. It's my job. I'm learning to become aware, more aware, and know that a lot of power to change myself is in the thoughts that I entertain. And entertaining is exactly the right word. When I monitor my thoughts, I realize that ideas just come up. We haven't much to say about our ideas. At least they're coming into the brain. But allowing space in my brain to ruminate, review, and yes, entertain is exactly what I have power over. This is the root of our own self-power. The root of it. Sadly, I've noticed at times when I have an idea that I know is iffy or wrong, I may actually not just answer that door when they ring the bell, but I will open it. I will invite them in. I will bring them to my table. I will serve them tea and crumpets. How? What? Me? Oh, how I can entertain thoughts. Even when my best self knows they could be injurious. Anyway, changing myself starts with changing my thoughts, countering those ideas that come in, reasoning with them. It's my responsibility. Stop what I'm doing. Think about that. Why is that wrong? Why am I sure that Spirit has said silently things against these thoughts and ideas? It takes time. And I don't want to take the time sometimes. But that is what must be done. So in conclusion, although this time in the USA is baffling to me, I understand now that we are in a new era when the intent of a fine Constitution is being interpreted differently. As a country, the USA is relatively young. When I was in college, we celebrated the 200th birthday. Think of civilizations all over the earth that are millennia long. So it helps to look at history. It was my grandmother that urged me, take more history classes. Learn what's happened so you can plan what happens in the future. And I've learned there have been other times when laws did not seem to correctly interpret our Constitution or its intent. For instance, at the birth of our country in 1776, all 13 colonies had legal slavery. But bit by bit, the states independently made their own decisions to outlaw it or not. This is the problem that changed many Michiganders. Because when slaves escaped in the South, they had to come north. And sometimes they had to get to Canada. And you know, Michigan is the quickest way to get to Canada. But before they got to Canada, who needed to protect them? The regular people. Simpler people, maybe, than you and I that just knew in their hearts slavery was wrong. I've visited churches in Detroit where they've showed me the places that they set aside for slaves to hide while those premises were being inspected. Common people did this because they knew in their hearts what was right. And we do too, if we listen. If we take that time to monitor our ideas and decide if they will even get a second playing in our mind. If we decide we can stop that rumination. And that's the seat of our power. Finally, in 1865, slavery was outruled in the United States. The 13th Amendment was added. In all times, in all ways, we encounter thoughts that can change both us and society. Will we answer the door when the poor ideas come knocking? Will we invite them in for tea and crumpets? We are still evolving as a country. We are still growing up. But we, us in this very place, this very space and time, we are here for a reason. It is our responsibility to stand up. It is our responsibility to remember our thoughts. So important. It is our responsibility to help evolve into a country which will provide opportunities for everyone, regardless, no exceptions.